Okay, so welcome to what is essentially part 2 of the tank preparation and putting in the chemical liner. So in the previous episode we removed the rust using a process called electrolysis. And if you haven't seen that video, I suggest you go and watch that, sort of part 1 of this process, and there's a card in the corner that you can go and click on, and that'll take you to that video. Right, so we'll pick up now where we left off in the last video. Alright, the product I've chosen is this red, white, blue. And I like this product. I used it in basket case. Anyone who has watched that series will have seen me do this process before. So first thing we need to do, I've measured out 4 litres of water into this container, and we need to put this rust remover in there. That's the first part of the process. So of course you've got to plug the holes in the tank. I've plugged up the fuel tap, just made a quick plate out of actually this aluminium flat bar, no style points, just chopped it up, and I've filled. I found a lid off a leather treatment tin, like a tobacco tin, that I put into where the fuel tap was. Hopefully that'll be strong enough to seal. So I'm just dissolving this in now. They say to dissolve it into the 4 litres. It looks like it's pretty well dissolved. The instructions also say. So this is why this process takes so darn long. This particular part of the process, we have to empty the contents of this into the tank, give it a good swill around, and then we've got to let it sit. And we've got to let it sit for 2 hours in different positions to make sure it covers the entire tank. And then we let it sit overnight, face down in the same orientation it's in now. Alright, well that's pretty well dissolved. In the funnel, hopefully this doesn't all just come pouring out the bottom. Right, now to seal the top of the tank, they tell you to cut a metal disc and tape it on there, but not everyone works in a winery. This is a silicon barrel plug out of a wine barrel, and I think that's going to do the job nicely. Let's check for leaks. A little bit of a dribble out of the where the height gauge goes, because I think this is a bit flimsy. It could probably do with a bit more on there, but the stuff's in there now, so give it a swirl around. We'll just try not to put too much around that filler level gauge. Right, so what we'll do, we want to get down to all the areas where there's likely to be rust, and we know there's a fair bit in there, or was a fair bit in there. So what we'll do essentially is just prop it. I'll get a piece of timber or something to replace that box, and we'll just move it around every 2 hours. It's got to stay in one position for 2 hours, and you've got to try and cover the entire tank. So you can see this is going to take quite a bit of time. Alright, so that was the coal caustic or whatever the hell it is that we put in there to de-rust it. I've rinsed the tank out, and then immediately after you've done that you need to apply the pre-treatment, and what that does is it passivates the surface and prevents any further rust forming. This is a very simple process, and I've done it off camera because it had to be done straight away as soon as it was rinsed. And I came home from work one night, rinsed the tank out, threw this in there, and look, if you're really desperate to see it, I've done it on basket case, and there's a link in the corner again, and also in the description to that video, and you can watch the whole process. But essentially all you do is you boil up 2 litres of water, you mix this in with it, you put it in the tank and you swish it around for 5 to 10 minutes, and then you drain it, and then you just let it dry. So that's where we're at now. Okay, so now's the point where we need to actually apply the chemical liner. Now they recommend that we'd have to plug all the holes back up, and they recommend that you use plumber's tape, like a Teflon tape, as a release agent essentially on any bolts that you put back into the tank at this point. I've already done these ones and applied the plumber's tape to that. This is just obviously the fuel tap location. Now the paint on this tank has suffered a fair bit. It's lifting off and it's been a bit scratched and knocked about. So I guess we'll have to paint it, Bill. So I'm not too worried about the outside surface, the outside paint work, because we're going to have to redo it anyway. Right, so next part. The epoxy resin. So this is the actual chemical liner that's going to coat our tank and make it nice and clean in there for petrol. And we've arrested the rust now, so we'll coat it, and that will be the end of that. This one of the reasons why I initially chose the red, white, blue, because it is suitable for fuel tanks up to 25 litres. You need to be careful of that because some of them are only for smaller fuel tanks. And if you've got a big tank, like on the GS1000, or even this one, you won't have enough to properly coat the tank. But since I did choose this, I've been very happy with it. Not in the least now knowing that it's actually made in Tasmania, at Triabunna. And I've talked to the guy on the phone, and they're very, very helpful, and they can talk you through any technical issues. I rang him up to see if I could put another coat of it in the GS1000 to arrest that hole that has come through the weld. And essentially, yes, he said you can. He said you obviously don't need to do all the other nonsense, the de-rusting process and the passivation process. You just need to make sure the tank's dried out completely, give it a wash with, I think he said methylated spirits or something, and then let that dry, and then you can reapply the liner, which means that had it not got to the point where it is now, where the tank is, the paintwork's actually split above that hole, I could have just arrested it, 20/20 hindsight, I could have arrested the issue by just applying another liner to it. The reason that I didn't put a lot of lining in the top, that tank was full of holes. It was rusty as, it was leaking out everywhere, and I concentrated the liner in the lower part of the tank where all the problems were. What's happened is where mine was welded up at the top, there's a little pinhole in the weld, and vapours were getting out of that and under the tank. I didn't concentrate much of it up in the top, and I probably should have, with the benefit of hindsight. So anyway, all that aside, let's get this one done. So you mix this up. I can still see that there's a little bit of product in there, so I just keep mixing it up until it's fully mixed. Might spin this around so you can get a better look-see. Right, I think we're good. And what we have to do essentially is tip the hardener into the epoxy, into the resin. Now it's at this point that they suggest to you that you do not get any of this on the paintwork if you're concerned at all about your paintwork. You should probably, I mean I'm not, because I'm not concerned about the paintwork, but if you were, you would keep a wet cloth with you, and if you spilt any on the paintwork, you wipe it off immediately. So we've tipped that in, and we just take a clean mixer of some description and start mixing it through until it's all a uniform colour. You need to scrape down the walls of the container as well as the base of the container. Make sure you get all of that resin mixed through. Goes a very pale blue colour. Obviously you're mixing white hardener with blue resin. Right, now we let it sit for 2 minutes and then we come back and mix it again. Alright, 2 minutes are up, give it another mix up, and you can see it's very goopy. Now this stays hard for about an hour, so you've got plenty of time to make sure you move it all around the inside of the tank. Right, now comes the fun part. Oh no, there's still a bit of dark on the end of that spatula. I'm just going to make sure we mix that through. I don't think I'm going to get that off that. I'm not too worried because in the scheme of things I don't think that's going to make any difference. Right, now I'll try and rearrange things here. Hang on. It helps to have that second camera. Oh geez, I've had some trouble with audio lately. And I have my radio mic on. And like, through this video and the one prior, I've had issues where the cable hasn't been plugged in properly, or I've had it on the wrong bloody channel or something silly because I don't have a sound engineer. I don't have the ability to be checking it all the time. Right. That's about as good as it's going to get. Now, we just move it around. I can't really show you much here. I'll show you when it's finished. Yeah, as I was saying about the camera, I was able to capture the audio off that rather than the audio from my microphones, which is going into the first camera. And I said I wasn't worried about the outside of the tank, but we don't need to create anything else to have to sand off when we go to paint it. So I suggest while you're doing this that you just think about what's happening inside the tank. If you lay it down in a certain section, all of the excess that hasn't already adhered to one of the surfaces is going to pool in that area. So when you rotate it, just have a think about where that liquid is going to flow next, and keep moving it around until you're happy that you've got it all covered. Alright, so now I've spent a few hours just rotating this thing around. It's a bit cold. It's quite cool here in Tassie. It's only about 13 degrees Celsius today. I think if it was in a warmer climate, this would happen a lot faster, because it pools where you've left it sitting, and then you can sort of move it, and that pool of liquid starts to move around, and it doesn't drop off where it's already adhered. How's it look inside the tank? I'm not sure what you can see in there, but it basically just coats over a thin coating. It's semi-transparent. You can sort of see through it. I don't want to put my borescope in there for the simple purpose, for the simple reason that I was poking it around in there earlier while I was railing it around to see if I was getting everywhere, and I kept poking it into the epoxy, and I don't want to compromise that epoxy. I'll just let that. I'm convinced and satisfied now that I've managed to get it all over the tank. So now we just let that let that cure, and while it's still green, you just pull all the bolts and everything out, and just leave the tank open. But you want to make sure that's not going to be running out of those holes. So what I'll probably do, so I'll flip it over, and I'll pop the cover off where the fuel level sender goes and the fuel tap goes, and that'll be it. I'll just let it cure properly then for a week before you can use it. So you'll need to budget. If you've got a whole weekend to do this, you'll get it done in that weekend, but then you need a week to cure. So you need a budget for your bike being off the road for a week and a half to 2 weeks. This has taken me about 3 weeks because of all the other commitments. But that's it now for the fuel tank. She's ready to take fuel. But that's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and comment, and I'll catch you next time on Andy's Motorcycle Obsessions. Bye for now.